This is Samvad with Sandesh. In conversation, we have with us two dignitaries who have been very active for freedom, liberty. We have with us in the show today Andy Eyschen, who is an Australian and is the co-founder of the Language of Liberty Institute. He co-founded the Language of Liberty Institute in the year 2005. Welcome, Andy, to the show.
Namaste, Sandesh.
And we have in the show Jacek Spendel. He's from Poland, and he's the president of the Freedom and Entrepreneurship Foundation, as well as the project director of Project Arizona. Jacek, welcome to the show.
Good morning, namaste. It's my pleasure.
Andy, you've been working with various dignitaries. I heard you've been traveling around the globe, 88 countries to be precise, many more to go still. So this Nepal and its aspects I heard when I was in conversation with you. This was for the second time that you're here. Jacek, is it the same with you? Is it Nepal the first time?
It is the first time in Nepal.
Okay.
And I travel a little bit less countries than Andy, around 60,
Okay.
but I try hard.
So what brings you to Nepal and especially to Biratnagar?
So we are very glad to be here in Biratnagar. We received a warm invitation from our friends and allies in Liberty, the Bikalpa and Alternative organization run by Basanta Adhikari. And Basanta met our president, Glenn Cripe, in 2016 at Asia Liberty Forum. And that was the first conversation about possibility of having Liberty Camp.
Okay.
But you know, often conversations don't lead to projects. But in this case, Basanta appeared to be very professional person, and his think tank is fulfilling what they promise, and they are very, very professional. So we started communication quickly, and it became possible a few months ago when we received funding for this camp, and we are so glad to be here. And we just finished this camp a few hours ago, and it was outstanding, and we're very, very glad about
And
all
it's
these
nice
events.
to know that this is the 29th country that the Liberty Camp is being held. So 28 countries, is it like all the developed countries, the underdeveloped countries, or the developing countries? Where has it been organized in the past?
They are usually not developed countries, as the message of freedom and message of reforms, it has higher chance to be implemented to influence decision makers in underdeveloped countries. And we do have some interesting stories from other countries where different kind of plans we drafted with students were later actually discussed on the high level. This is more realistic. It has higher chance of being implemented in less developed countries than developed countries. However, we do have a few experiences in countries that are developed, like Portugal. We did have a camp even in the United States for Cuban refugees. And Brazil. There were a number of different countries. We visited many different continents. I don't remember, 4 or 5, at least 4.
Yeah, haven't been to Australia yet.
Yes, but Andy is from
South America. We started in Eastern Europe, and the idea actually didn't come from any of us. It was friends of ours who started this, and our camps were called English Liberty Camps or Liberty English Camps originally, because this started after the fall of communism in Russia, and many young people, they were interested in learning English because they realized, and in fact the language of liberty, we refer to it as the English language. So English is the language of liberty, because when you speak English, you have more opportunity, you can go to more
Accessibility
places.
is more.
Exactly. So opportunity, of course, is choice, is freedom. So English
That's
is
how
the...
it works. Okay, Andy, basically, this is, you're the co-founder of the Language of Liberty Institute that organizes the
correct.
Liberty Camp.
Yeah.
When we hear the term camp, it's more related to going outside the boundaries
Yes.
and then seeking better things or bigger knowledges of this. So what's this Liberty Camp all about?
Yes, in fact, the reason why it's called a camp is because we very rarely go into big cities.
Okay.
So the idea started even in our first camp was in Lithuania,
Mhm.
also in Eastern Europe.
Yeah,
So
okay.
freedom was new, business was new to these people.
Mhm.
They're, especially the young people, because their parents could not tell them how to run a business, because
Okay.
under the communist regime you were not allowed to have your own business.
Yeah.
Everybody was an employee of the state.
It was a closed economy.
That's right. So now all of a sudden they were liberated,
Uh-huh.
and the young people didn't know who should they turn to. So
Exactly.
this was a gap that we discovered, and so we filled that gap. And we wanted to spend as much time as possible with these young people. And our audience is usually sort of 18 to 25 year, so the university age group. Yeah?
Yeah.
So these are our preferred students, and they also were the ones who wanted to learn English and who wanted to know, how do I start a business? How do I run a business? Do I have to go look for a job, or are there other opportunities? Are there alternatives? Which is one of the reasons why I like Vikalpa, because what we are actually offering is an alternative.
Okay, great.
And one of the alternatives that we offer is starting your own business.
Mhm.
And having traveled a little bit more than Jacek, 88 countries, so he's catching up with me, so I have to watch out.
Yeah.
But in all of these countries, and we have the camps now in 29 countries,
Mhm.
with young people, that age group, which gives us a very unique
Uh-huh.
perspective of what young people think
Yeah.
and what they want to achieve in life.
Yeah.
And the world today is much more complex than it was when I was their age. Right?
Yeah.
So, and now they want to know, what do I do? And one of the problems that all of the 88 countries have
Mhm.
is called youth unemployment.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's probably one of the single biggest problems in the world today.
Mhm.
And it's not limited to developing countries,
Mhm.
even the developed countries. Yeah.
Okay.
Like in Greece,
Yeah.
more than a quarter of all young people are jobless.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's in a developed country.
Yeah.
So in the developing countries, people are looking for jobs, but there are no jobs. Right? So one of the Vikalpas that we offer,
The alternatives.
alternatives, yes,
Great.
is to start your own business and create your own
So
job.
it's about promoting entrepreneurship
Yes,
in some way.
we have, well, no, in a real way, because we have three main sections or topics, if you like.
Okay.
So the first one is the philosophy of freedom. The second one is the free market economics.
Mhm.
And the third one is entrepreneurship. The entrepreneurship is the practical application of the first two.
Okay.
We want you to have a philosophy. We want you to know what life is all about. What are your values? What are your thinking? The free market economics is you need to have some understanding of economics, because every person in the world is an economist.
Okay.
Because economics is about the allocation of resources,
Resources,
and every one of us has resources. Even if you don't have any money, you still have time,
Yeah.
and time is your most valuable resource. So therefore, in that sense, every one of us has to choose, how do you allocate your time, which is your resource,
Okay.
and what return do you get on that?
So this Liberty Camp is basically been organized to promote the youth into becoming a little more independent about what they choose to be, and so that they contribute to the society in a more proactive way. That's what the purpose is of this camp.
That is definitely one of the purposes. So the entrepreneurship part is the practical application of the theory, if you like.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
So it's not just, we don't just teach the theory. We want to see action.
So on the basis of the experiences that you've been having since this camp was conducted in 28 different countries previous to Nepal,
Yes.
and in some countries multiple times, what has been the most satisfying factor of these camps and the youths that have been involved? How have they evolved over the period of time?
Well, one of our successors is sitting right next to me.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So
Congratulations.
Jacek was one of our students, and now he's not
He's
only
the
one of
resource
our
person,
teachers,
yeah,
now
he's
he's
the
one of
resource
our
person.
collaborators, right?
Okay.
So we've had many students who come back to be teachers, and then they become organizers.
Okay.
Because in each one of these countries, we are not the ones that are organizing the camp. In each country, we work with somebody like Pasanta,
Okay.
who knows the local people, who invites the students, because we don't know
Exactly.
the students.
Exactly.
So our customer is not the students themselves as such.
Okay.
They're his customers. They're Bikalpa's customers. So our customer is Bikalpa, and in each country we work with somebody like Pasanta.
Okay. हामी कुराकानी गर्दैछौँ संवादित सन्देशमा। आज संवादित सन्देशमा हामीले दुईजना अतिथिसँग कुराकानी गरिरहेका छौँ। एकजना व्यक्तित्व हुनुहुन्छ ल्याङ्ग्वेज अफ लिबर्टी इन्स्टिट्युटका को फाउन्डर 2005 मा उहाँले यो ल्याङ्ग्वेज अफ लिबर्टी इन्स्टिट्युट यो स्थापना गर्नुभएको थियो एन्डी आइसन र त्यस्तै गरी अर्का व्यक्तित्व हुनुहुन्छ फ्रिडम एन्टरप्रेन्योरशिप फाउन्डेसनका प्रेसिडेन्ट ज्यासेक स्पेन्डर उहाँ प्रोजेक्ट एरिजोनाका प्रोजेक्ट डाइरेक्टर पनि हुनुहुन्छ वी आर इन कन्भर्सेसन इन संवाद विथ सन्देश एन्ड वी हेभ two dignitaries on the show right now, Language of Liberty Institute co-founder 2005 Andy Eyschen, as well as the president of the Freedom and Entrepreneurship Foundation, Jacek Spendel, who is also the project director at Project Arizona. Basically, now since you were a student sometime at this Liberty Camp, and now you are the resource person who's been organizing this, Jacek, what was freedom before you joined Liberty Camp? And what has been the definition of freedom for you after the Liberty Camp?
Well, the first experience I had with Liberty Camp back in 2007, when I went to Liberty Camp in Slovakia, opened my eyes for many new aspects of freedom. I was not only learning better English, because that was important part, English conversation, but also I discovered philosophers who I didn't know all of them before, and we did even read texts of certain philosophers, certain heroes of classical liberal thought, and we discussed later what we learned. So it was entry for me for the world of ideas that matter a lot, because first you learn good theory, and then you are able to implement it into a good practice. There is no good practice without good theory. And moreover, networking, I would say. At dozens of Liberty Camp I attended, I met extraordinary people. Some of them are teachers, professional teachers, some of them are entrepreneurs, and other are think tank leaders, and these networks, these friendships sometimes, they bring fruits in shape of new projects, sometimes businesses, sometimes just friendships, and these are global networks, honestly. As you heard how many countries we visited, we find very good people usually at these camps, and I see huge value in networking itself.
So it's a value addition to all the stakeholders, as you said, the customers who come in, and as well as for resource people. So how can freedom be defined, and how can it be applied?
So we talk about freedom in its manifestation in the social and political and economical relations. We do not talk about freedom as metaphysical concept. We do talk about freedom that we can achieve in the relation between government and an individual. So it is essential that an individual is as much free as possible from coercion coming from the rulers, the power, the governments of this world, both in the sense of economic freedom, restricting economic activity through regulation, taxes, and so on, and we also talk about individual freedom that can be manifested in terms of freedom of speech,
Okay.
in terms of freedom of association, freedom of religion also, and different kinds of actions of an individual, because we believe that the only restriction of human freedom is when you pass the line where somebody else's freedom is infringed.
Yeah.
Until you don't cross this line, you are perfectly free to do whatever you want.
Basically, when they say that when demanding freedom for yourself, you have to take into account that the other person also wants to be free, right?
Yes,
You cannot
that's the good
overtake
boundary.
the freedom of others to have your freedom. So
Exactly.
how has this evolved in terms of the young generation that you all address? Basically, as right now Andy was saying, that it's between 18 to 25 to 30. That's the age bracket of people that come into your Liberty Camp. Like how, because these people, they think they know it all, they've seen it all, they have that exuberance in them, the excitement to do it. But how do these people view freedom? How have they addressed this freedom? Andy?
Yes, that's a very interesting question. Sometimes they do think they have seen it all, but they know deep inside, they know that they haven't.
They know the reality.
And in fact, see, one of the reasons why we like university students is because when they go to university, it's the first time in their life that they're actually free, quote unquote.
Okay, yeah.
And the reason for that is, see, when you are born, you are not born free.
Yeah.
Even despite BFN, you know, you're not born free. But you are born as a dependent. You are dependent on your parents, and then you go to school. You're dependent on your parents and your teachers to educate you. And when you are in primary school and secondary school, the teachers expect you to learn. They expect you to obey. They expect you to take in whatever they tell you.
The prescribed syllabus.
Correct. But once you go to university, you are expected, probably for the first time in your life, to think an original thought.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is that you are expected to write a dissertation or a thesis or a PhD, doctorate or whatever,
Exactly.
and that must be original, right? You cannot copy from anybody else, so you have to think for yourself before you can write an original document,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
And you will be evaluated on the
that
originality
yeah.
of that document.
Yeah.
So if you don't know how to think for yourself, it's very difficult to write some original stuff. Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's one of the reasons why we like the university type students, because they are actually encouraged
Yeah.
to think for themselves. See, once they have a job, they are no longer encouraged. They're encouraged to think for their
the
employer.
organizer, yeah.
That's right. So this is probably the freest time that these students have in their whole life. Right?
The university days. That's the
Yes,
freest
yes.
time that they
Unless, of course, unless you become an entrepreneur,
Okay.
then your freedom can continue beyond university. And Jacek is a good example of that, because not only was he one of our students, he also became an entrepreneur. And maybe you can say a few things about your business.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually I was motivated, Andy, very much by your speeches, your talks at different Liberty camps, and I wanted to try myself. And moreover, I'm running this Freedom and Entrepreneurship Foundation, and people sometimes were challenging me, telling, "Hey, what do you know about entrepreneurship? You know it from books, right?"
Oh, okay.
And I was like, "Yeah, you're pretty right, but maybe I can change it." And I did start a pizza business in Poland. I had a pizza food truck and small restaurant. And it was a very interesting experience, and unfortunately I can tell you now that my thoughts on a government intrusion into business were having grounds. It is very tough to run a small business in my country, in Poland. It's a lot of bureaucratic barriers, regulations, taxes and so on. But it was still, I feel glad I made it. I made my experience richer. I observed how human relations look like? Because this is a big part of doing business. Also, these relations with different branches of government, the markets, and so on.
Yeah.
I sold this business to focus a bit more on the foundation which I am leading, but even though I am very, very glad for this experience I had.
Okay, so hearing both of you, I guess like freedom can be talked about on a two-way basis. One, where I as an individual, I'm free to do what I want to do. But then, even my freedom has to be addressed in such a way that I do not intrude on others' freedom. There's the state which imposes taxes or which makes us follow certain rules and guidelines through the constitution or through the laws and the bylaws. So in this context, when I talk about my individual freedom, it's my way of life, my thought process that I can apply anyway. But when I talk about economic freedom, it's what I have to be a little bit more perspective enough to think about what the state or the country's rules and regulations want. So in that context, I'd like to seek an answer from both of you. How does an individual and an economic freedom differ, and how can you define that? Because you have been talking about through the Liberty Camp about the philosophy, the free market entrepreneurship, the economy, and as well as entrepreneurship.
Right.
So when you are an entrepreneur, you are an individual with your freedom and thought of doing your own business.
Yes.
But when you go into the market, you have to follow the rules and regulations of the state. So how does this? What do you mean by this, and how can it be differentiated? Andy.
Okay. Okay. So you asked about the difference between the individual freedom and we know what individual freedom is.
Yeah.
It means I can do whatever I want, but freedom is not license. So the English language has actually three words. One is liberty, and one is freedom. We use these two words interchangeably, they're synonymous, right? But then there's a third one, which is license. And we do not promote license, we promote freedom with responsibility. License is freedom without responsibility. That means I just do whatever I want and I don't care what you think about it, right? But freedom with responsibility reminds me that my freedom ends where your freedom begins.
Exactly.
And if we all behave like this, and
it's going to be a good relay race where you're passing on the baton of that thing that you need to do.
That's right. That's right. And then there are three levels, if you like. There's the individual level, which of course we think is the most important one. Then the second level is the business level, and the third level is the national level. The principles apply at all three levels, and that's what makes it very interesting. And the other aspect is that the word innovation, which is slightly different from invention. You don't have to invent something new in order to innovate.
You just develop on it.
Yes, you develop
modify it.
or you modify it, so you
add on something.
Yes,
to it.
probably the best known example is the smartphone. We all have the smartphone,
Exactly.
which was invented in 2007 by Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
Steve Jobs did not invent the telephone; he invented the smartphone, which was a change or a modification of the original telephone, right? And of course that was a very successful one.
Yeah.
But it also shows how important the innovation is. Now, innovation means you're doing something that hasn't been done before. Very much like the university student who writes a thesis. You have to have an original thesis. Here you have to have an original idea, and then you have to put this idea into practice. And to do that, you need freedom. I spoke at a event in China. I had 50 Chinese students who had never been outside of China before, also university students, and I asked them, name me one invention or one innovation that has happened in China since 1949. Nobody was able to come up with anything. I mean, China invented, back in the old days, that they were great inventors, But now,
Nothing in this modern world.
no, they are good copiers, and they are even able to improve on these copies. But there are no original ideas so far that I know that have come out of China. Like, see, China's richest man, Jack Ma, yeah, who runs Alibaba,
Okay.
but that's a copy of Amazon. Right, yeah. So they're very good copiers, and they're very good workers. They're hard workers, and but when it comes to innovation, in fact, one of the students said, "If we do what you tell us, we will all go to jail."
Okay.
Right? In China, the government is allowed to innovate, but not the individual. And if the individual does something that hasn't been done before, well, that is very revolutionary, and that could be dangerous. That could be that's suspicious. Right?
We stop here. So basically, Andy, we were discussing about the perspectives of freedom in individual terms. What about the economic freedom?
Yes, so in summary, the individual freedom means that I'm in control of my life. Because if I'm not in control, somebody else is.
Okay.
And so we prefer to be in control ourselves. So that's the individual freedom. And the economic freedom means that I can do with my resources as I choose to. And my resources include my time, as we discussed before, my skills, my talents, my education, and of course my money. So economic freedom means that I decide what is being done with these resources.
Okay. So time is one of the most important resources.
Correct.
That can be converted into economic terms.
Time is money.
Time is money. Okay. In this sense, what is your take on how the individual and the economic freedom and its differentiations?
Well, I believe that one is extension of another. If you are in control of your life, what's happening to your body, what's happening to your time, and so on, and it is interconnected with the property rights, because we believe that liberty goes hand by hand with property, private property. So this allocation of resources, and in order to prosper, you need to have economic freedom. The best countries and businesses emerged in the environment of voluntary transactions. It's win-win when two sides decide to exchange goods or exchange money for goods. Money represents value. And there is no third side. There's a lack of institution that would mandate them to do this transaction. There is a lack of third person who would force them under the gunpoint to do any transaction. And this must be voluntary. And also innovation that Andy already mentioned happens in the environment of freedom. Therefore, I believe this economic freedom is extension of individual
listening
freedom.
to you, this would be a sort of a utopia for a developed nation, like where I as an individual, I have the freedom in both economic terms as well as an individual to exercise what I would love to do. But for a underdeveloped country or a developing country like Nepal, where the state also needs to at least protect, how do you take that freedom to be? Where a certain degree of protectionism is also considered to be a leverage point for freedom and liberty to do your business, to be an entrepreneur, where the state also protects you. Can that be considered a form
Are
of
you
freedom?
talking about? Are you talking, Sandesh, about economic protection?
Yeah.
In terms of tariffs, maybe?
In terms of tariffs, maybe in terms of duties that are imposed, or maybe in terms of how the resources or the industries that are localized are protected from multinational companies. Can that be also a way of how liberty or freedom can be exercised as a protectionism?
Well, I believe, and I think we believe that these principles of economic freedom, individual freedom, do not find boundaries of national borders or any other borders. If win-win is the best concept for economic transaction, it's not just between Biratnagar and Kathmandu. It also applies to businesses with India, businesses with Europe, America, wherever. And I know that from one hand it sounds dangerous that we might open economic border for transactions without this third side, this governments to mandate things and put tariffs. That sounds for many people dangerous, but it is not true. As much as economic boundaries between states within one country, we understand that this would be a strange concept. Despite there are differences, I'm sure people in Kathmandu earn more than in other parts of Nepal, correct? Yeah, so someone could make an argument that, well, we need to protect businesses of Biratnagar because they are stronger in Kathmandu and they can hurt us. We don't do this, right? And it's obvious that that would not work. Similar applies to these protectionist measures. And there were interesting cases in the history where certain countries opened their borders for international trade. These are nations of European Union that joined the Union in 2004, including my country, Poland. I remember these arguments of people who said, now Germany will flood our markets. Now Polish farmer has no place in the economy because he's weak comparing to West. You know what? Polish farmer is stronger now than he was before. Estonia did even stronger moves in early 90s. They were not pushed by anybody. It was not because of European Union. They declared unilateral free trade with all the world. They were like Hong Kong. And Hong Kong is also an example of open borders for goods. And they were afraid in Estonia that their farmers will be finished, that the local companies will collapse. You know, they had Soviet heritage. They did not grow strong. And what happened? That only made them stronger, and farming exists in Estonia. Many companies exist. There are certain branches that modifies because of the creative destruction. If something collapses, it doesn't mean that there is just empty hole after it. Often happens something that a famous economist, his name is. Forgot about creative destruction. Who coined this?
Joseph Schumpeter.
Yeah, Joseph Schumpeter. I just forgot. An economist from Austria. He coined this term, and it happens in the environment of freedom also. You know, one job is not one type of business is not guaranteed forever. It will be changing, but if you give freedom, it will be remodeled into something that brings more value. Therefore, I believe that these protectionist measures just don't work, and we should allow freedom, especially for poor countries like Nepal, because you need it the most. Everybody needs freedom, but you will feel the fruits of freedom quicker and more than anybody else.
And there would be more of a win-win situation for all.
Definitely.
We are talking about the freedom. We are talking about liberty. And this is Samvad with Sandesh in conversation with Andy Eyschen, the co-founder of the Language of Liberty Institute, and also with Jacek Spendel, who's from Poland, and he's the president of the Freedom and Entrepreneurship Foundation, as well as the project director of Project Arizona. We are basically talking about the Liberty Camp that is being organized in Biratnagar, and also will be organized in Dhulikhel, Kathmandu. Talking about the processes of how this liberty, freedom, and its involvement through individual and economic measures go. Right now, Jacek was just talking about where countries, irrespective of what they are if they are given a freedom of practicing their worth and value, they win. So even as a poor or a weaker country like Estonia or Poland could take on the might of Germany and the other Western European countries. Andy, what makes a country poor or rich?
That's also a very good question, and it's in fact that's a subject that we discuss at our Liberty camps. But before I answer that, I'd like to add something to what you talked about before about protectionism. The reason why we are against protectionism is, number one, it doesn't work, like Jacek has already pointed out, but there's an even more sinister reason than that, and that is protectionism makes you lazy.
Okay.
And that is probably more destructive than you imagine. If you feel protected, you tend to take life easy, you don't care, the government will look after me.
Exactly.
And in fact, that attitude is more prevalent in the developed world than in the developing world, and our message resonates much better in the developing world than in the developed world.
Exactly.
For that very reason.
Exactly.
Because in the developing world, you don't get that much protection, right? And the other, there's also a historical aspect to this. We had, before the Cold War ended, so before 1991, there were sort of Western type economies in Africa, and there were some in Asia. They chose two different paths to develop.
Okay.
The Africans chose import substitution. In other words, instead of importing things from overseas, we will make it ourselves and sell it to our own market. We now know that that did not work. The Asian countries, on the other hand, chose a totally different approach, and you may have heard the expression the Asian tigers. Yeah, so the Asian tigers, a country like Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines and so on, they became very rich, but they did not use import substitution, they used export orientation. So they decided to manufacture something for the purpose of exporting it, not for the purpose of
blocking somebody else.
Or even consuming it internally. I mean, a fraction, of course, was consumed internally, but that was not the main purpose. The main purpose was to export. Yes, and because the labor was cheap, so they had a competitive advantage here compared to the other ones, and therefore they were able to export cheaper than anybody else, and they became rich countries. So that's another reason why protectionism does not really work.
So how do you, as I would like to ask again, like what makes a country poor or rich then? So it's all about not just thinking for yourself, but thinking on a global perspective? Well, the world is the market?
Today, I mean, since 1992, when globalization started, basically you have no more choice. You have to, the world is your market.
Yeah, exactly.
It's now a what we call it the global village, right?
So in that sense, you're promoting liberalization more and more through these liberty camps and through those entrepreneurship development. You're promoting liberalization so that the globalization can be really enforced in the time.
Yes, but we'd like to bring it down to the level of the individual.
The grassroots level.
So the grassroots level, and that's where the entrepreneurship comes in. So any government that encourages entrepreneurs will be a rich country. Yeah? The United States is the biggest economy in the world. The United States also happens to have the largest number of entrepreneurs. So the two go hand in hand. And one of the charts that we show at our Liberty camps is we have a chart that shows the GDP per capita for the last 1,000 years. And you can basically say that from the year 1 to the year 1800. So for 1,800 years, the per capita GDP did not change more than 10% either way. It was around $450 US in sort of today's dollar terms. But in 1800, all of a sudden the graph goes up exponentially. And from 450, now the GDP per capita is around 12 to 14,000 worldwide per person. so you can evaluate yourself.
Yeah.
If your income is below $12,000 per year, you are poor or you are below average. If it is above 14,000 or 12,000, you can consider yourself richer, above average. Right. So at the moment, China is around 9,000. So China is still below the world average, even though it is the second largest economy in the world, but only because it has 1.3 billion people.
Okay. So lastly, like you're here for the Liberty Camp. This is your 29th nation that the Liberty Camp is being organized. We've been organizing these camps for entrepreneurship, where this philosophy of free market economy has been promoted. In context to Nepal, you in Viratnagar, you'll be going to Dhuli Khel. How can Nepal, a country like Nepal, benefit from the liberal values and free market system? This is a question for both of you as the signing off.
Oh, so signing off. Well, like we tell all our students, is that freedom is the first condition to create prosperity, and we have this on our T-shirt here, as you can see. So freedom and prosperity are closely linked. They go hand in hand. Having freedom does not guarantee that you're going to be prosperous. Yes, yeah. The one does not automatically lead to the other. You need to do some work. And again, if you feel protected by the government, why would I do the work?
Exactly.
Yeah, why would I take the risk?
That would promote lethargic
Yes.
conditions.
So for the government to improve the condition in the country, it should make life easier for entrepreneurs. Yeah? Give them the freedom that they need to invent things, to innovate, to come up with new ideas, to create something that hasn't been created anywhere else and export it to the rest of the world. The world is your oyster, right? But you need to be allowed to do that. Putting 240% import duties is not the way to go, right?
It's ridiculous.
Well, yes. You can say that, okay. I'm a guest here, so
being a Nepali, I can say that.
yes, I do. But generally, because I have no incentive to export. I have no incentive to create something new, and entrepreneurs need incentives. Yeah. They need the freedom, but they also need the incentives, because an entrepreneur takes risks. And the profit that a business makes is the compensation for the risk that I'm taking. Otherwise, why should I take a risk? And this is one of the reasons why in developed countries, where the government will look after you if you don't have a job, they say, why should I become an entrepreneur? If I don't find a job, the government will pay me. I can just go and lie on the beach and enjoy life or whatever. Maybe not in Nepal, I lie on the mountain. But so I think Nepal is a beautiful country, so you have natural resources which are very valuable, which you can exploit in the tourism business. So I think tourism is already one of your main economic contributors. That could be developed much more. For a start, you could improve your roads, right? Because tourists don't like bumpy roads. And
The transportation system should be there. The good transportation
That's
system
right,
should be
nice hotels, all these things. So you have a great opportunity here to develop this industry.
And the same thing, because you've been a student of the Liberty Camp, you yourself are an entrepreneur, so how could Nepal and its entrepreneurs that you're trying to produce in the future benefit from the liberal values and the free market economy?
I am definitely certain about that Nepal can benefit from limited government, free markets, and basically implementing more freedom. I'm only a few days here, but I observe people. Our students were extraordinary, smart, happy, and well organized. I observe also people who are not students, who work in restaurant, in the hotel, and they are hardworking. Believe me, they are hardworking. They are also good listeners. They basically do everything that is expected from them and even more. And I talked to a few people about Nepalese people, and they are one of the best workers. The problem is that more and more people migrate from here. It's called brain drain. You are losing great people of Nepal, and this is the reason why the reforms we talk about, the necessity of freeing the markets, freeing the individual, are urgent here. If you want to keep these great people in Nepal, you don't want to lose them, and make other economies stronger with your human resources.
Exactly.
You should implement some of these freedom reforms, and I'm sure that it will positively contribute for Nepalese economy, for this beautiful country, and I wish you with my full heart that these changes will come one day, sooner than later.
Okay.
And
On this, yeah.
If I may just add, it will also save you to write a sign at the airport that says, "Would the last person to leave Nepal please switch off the lights?"
Okay. On this positive note, thank you very much for this wonderful insights that you provided on the Liberty Camp, as well as on the freedom, and both the economic freedom as well as the innovation freedom, and how it could be that Nepalese could benefit from this in the overall sense. Thank you for being in Biratnagar. Hope this is not the first. This is the first. Hope this is not the last, and many more to come. And we'll be interviewing you in the days to come, where you will be more positive about the prospects of Nepal. Thank you very much, Andy Eyschen, the co-founder of the Language of Liberty Institute, as well as Jacek Spendel, the president of the Freedom and Entrepreneurship Foundation, for this time that you've given to us. Hope your stay in Nepal will be more beautiful, and of course your students will make you proud. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure, Sandesh. Thank you very much.